Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Lloyd, and I'm an onboarding specialist at UserTesting, but I'm also a trained sociologist. And so my purpose is really leveraging behavioral science to integrate into business practices.
Awesome. And hey, everybody, I'm Agustin Gonzalez. I'm actually a solutions consultant at UserTesting. So love talking about the whole aspect of how brands can ultimately use the power of human insights to really power important business decisions. But in a former life, which seems like years and years and years ago now, also used to be a journalist. So the aspect of great and compelling storytelling is definitely near and dear to my heart. But Lisa, in the vein of storytelling, I think you've got a good story to kick us off on?
I do have a good story. Well, y'all tell me if it's good. I think it's good. Okay, so if you know the answer, do not tell me the answer, but I'm going to ask, do you know why we wear robes at graduation? And if you're tuning in, you can say yes or no in the comments. If you know it, don't tell why. So, do you know, Augustine?
I do, but I'd love for you to tell everybody else.
Okay, so a while ago, while I was graduating, my daughter at the time was 4, and she asked me, why am I wearing a cape? And she was tiny, so she didn't really know that it was a robe, but I realized that I didn't have an answer for her. So while I waited for my name to be called among the hundreds of graduating students at Temple University, I started researching on my phone why we wear robes to graduation. And I found out that it was a 12th century practice where scholars would study in uninhabited structures, and it was cold. And so they used to wear robes to stay warm. And over the years, we got heat and electricity. So the function of the robes didn't really serve its purpose anymore. But then it became a sense of pride and a way to distinguish scholars at the higher education levels. And so I use that story to really show, look at how something functions and really review outdated processes. So is your robe still there to keep you warm, or is it just a sense of pride? And I like businesses to really think about the things that they're doing and see if it's still serving its original function, or if it can be repurposed to serve another function. If neither of those are true, it's considered waste, and we need to get rid of it so that we can do better things with our time.
Love that, Lisa. And I mean, just the aspect of, the robes back in the 12th century, how scholars used to use that to really prime the mind for learning. I know you've got a lot of great tidbits and things to share on how businesses can do just that to more effectively communicate insights and help their teammates and other stakeholders really, learn and retain information better. But in the vein of using qualitative insights to and storytelling rather, to share qualitative insights with other business stakeholders, I wanted to kind of start off with, before I hand it back to you, Lisa, just something easy that you all can do right away. And something that can be really, really powerful. So it's the aspect of empathy hours, or even an empathy theater, where maybe once a week, invite colleagues from other teams to all get together, maybe watch some highlights from a customer interview, or recordings of users interacting with different aspects of your products or offerings, or maybe also even inviting a customer to talk live with the team as well, virtually. Doing things like this can really help emphasize the importance of customer-centric design, and also maybe help change the team's perspective on certain things, or maybe even help dispel some institutional myths, with some irrefutable evidence right from the customer's mouth.
Exactly. And your point reminds me of something I heard last night at an entrepreneurship chat. Neville Hall was speaking, and he said, be obsessed with your customers. And really, that's all it is, right? Being obsessed with your customers and implementing practices that really refine that way of thinking. So first things first, when we talk about storytelling, is priming the mind to learn, right? Creating the perfect environment where the information can be retained. The purpose of a story is to stick. It's to change an idea, or to change a practice, or to initiate some sort of change. And in order to do that, we actually need to get into the brain. Now, how many times have we gotten meetings on our calendars at 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. or 4:30 or even 5, because some people are extra crazy sometimes,
Way too
right?
many times, Lisa.
Way too many times. And then we're working all hours of the night. But the truth is that there's something called chronobiology. And in layman's terms, that is good timing. And so your body has this internal clock where it decides what your peak performance hours are. And for the human brain, the peak performance hour in learning new information is between 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So when you want to teach someone something and they're getting new information and they have to retain that information, that meeting time should be between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., not at 4 p.m., because their brain will be working against them. And I think it's this uncharted territory where people are not studying humans, but want to communicate with them, want to empower them, and want them to do these impossible things for the business, but you're working against their natural biology. So the point is to really leverage what we know about behavioral science and incorporate that into our business practices so that we're working with the brain and not against it. When you are teaching at 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., people are fresh. They've gotten some food in their system, hopefully. And something I want to share with businesses is it's your responsibility to create that environment, right? So people need to have eaten before a morning meeting. So now that we are facing Corona and a lot of us are quarantined, yes, you cannot buy snacks for the meeting and bring them in, but you can give your team gift cards or vouchers to order breakfast in advance and then start your meeting at the regular time. Another thing is really understanding attention versus focus. Now, those are two very different things. Attention is fleeting. It's actually our body's way of protecting us from predators long ago. So it can easily be broken. And the myth is that if somebody breaks your attention, you can't get them back. And that's not the truth. If somebody's attention is broken, that is a challenge for you to re-engage. So if the average time a person can pay attention is around 20 minutes, then when you are sharing information or updates, it needs to stop at 20 minutes, because after that, you have two options. You need to either re-engage them or end the meeting, right? Because their brain is tapped out. When you are doing things that require focus, in-depth conceptual thinking, where they are connecting dots and brainstorming and kind of doing the heavy lifting. Now, a human brain can focus for about 90 minutes. So for companies, I want you to really think about the length of your meetings, especially with clients. Some of our client meetings are 3 hours, but the brain tapped out at an hour and a half. So what did we do to keep that customer engaged? What did we do to keep our colleagues engaged? How are we working with the brain to make sure that we're giving it what it needs to stay in that focused lane? And so I struggle with this because we know these things to be a science, and yet we have an hour weekly meeting for updates, but people tap out at 20 minutes. So now you're keeping your employees and your colleagues in a meeting for 40 minutes where they're not effective, where they're not productive, and worst of all, where they're not being the expert at what they're the expert in. And so that's one of the things we really need to focus on: the timing of your meetings and the duration of your meetings, but also the intention of the meeting. Is this where they need to learn information, or is this just a quick update? We're just running, some stats down. So that's the first things I would say.
Perfect. Yeah. And Lisa, I mean, even thinking to the way that I personally operate during a typical business day, the aspect of 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Before 10 a.m., I'm usually prioritizing my day, catching up on emails that came in overnight. And my focus, now that you mentioned that, I realized my focus might not completely be all there with all the other things and competing priorities first thing in the morning. But then even after 2 p.m., maybe I had a big lunch, maybe I'm in a food coma, maybe thinking about a nap. So I think you're totally spot on in the aspect of, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. are really the hours where our minds are super prime for retaining information and learning as well. And something that I think is also really, really interesting in the aspect of storytelling in general, and curious to hear your take on this as well, is we get in a lot of situations just in business in general, and just relying on data and numbers and charts and graphs. And data by itself is not a great story. That's where it becomes really important, especially when you're talking about maybe customer-facing teams or product teams or research or design teams. Pairing some qualitative insight with that data and metrics to really tell that full holistic story to help power business decisions. So how can you do just that? It could be as easy as just getting a recording of a user or a customer running into an issue to help humanize that problem, and really see their story of interacting with that product. Because of course, as we've emphasized so far and we'll continue to emphasize, stories are just so powerful and can have that emotional impact. But then, to back that up, use metrics, maybe something that you see in Google Analytics or some survey data to help quantify that impact that particular problem is having on the business. So for example, maybe you're seeing a drop in conversions on a certain workflow on your website, for example. Getting that qualitative feedback and kind of that story of how and where and why the user is running into that issue on your site to humanize it, but then back that up with the data and the drop in conversions to tell that full story, and make it powerful, not just from an emotional standpoint, but also from a standpoint to where you can help quantify the impact of that too.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I'm going to ruffle a lot of feathers right now, but it has to be said, to your point, case studies are not stories. And I just want everybody in our industry and outside of our industry to understand that. Case studies are not stories. Stories have the responsibility of appealing to the deepest human emotions. Case studies reveal data. And it's in a nice package, don't get me wrong, but it's not a story. It doesn't tell the person why I care or why I relate to this. It's just data. And so we really have to think about how we tell these stories and not only relying on case studies. And data and stories are a marriage, right? So like you said, the story hooks people and then the data proves your point. So there are some memory techniques that would help alongside storytelling. Like one of them is lay off the acronyms, everyone. Acronyms mean different things to different people. It can get really confusing and very messy. So every time you feel like using an acronym, I want you to use an analogy instead. So when people are learning new information, they're overwhelmed, like their brain is in overload. And so one way to kind of release some of the tension is to use things that they already know that doesn't require any thought. So for our customers, for example, I'm their onboarding specialist, and then they have a customer success manager, and that's also known as a CSM, the acronym. When we tell customers, this is your CSM, this is your onboarding specialist, this is your account executive, they start to get overwhelmed because not only are they learning about people and roles, but now they have to learn this product. And then they have to align that product with their own goals, and it gets confusing. So one way I like to explain it to my customers is your customer success manager is like your doctor, and I'm like your nurse. So the doctor will manage your care long term, but I'm here for the next 60 days to make sure that everything is rolling the way it should be. And this gives them some sense of familiarity so that they can use the rest of their brain power on what I really need them to focus on, which is the product and how it can work in their favor. Another thing is association, and the brain is very smart, but it's also very naive. And so if you know that, let's say, Augustine, you really liked Lay's potato chips, and every time, that's good. This is not sponsored. Every time I see you, I have a bag of Lay's potato chips. Your brain starts to associate the feelings that you get when you see Lay's potato chips with me. So you'll think that you like me, but you really like the Lay's potato chips that you see in my hands. And your brain will start to produce chemicals that really say I'm enjoying this person. And when you enjoy and like a person, you're more able to learn from them and to communicate with them and really collaborate with them. And so in that same vein, when we talk about association, what is the candy or the bag of chips that you bring to your customers and your colleagues? What is the thing that they like that you're bringing into the room that will bring that barrier down and kind of ease the tension so that everyone can learn comfortably? And I don't think we spend a lot of time doing that. We spend a lot of time telling people why something works, when it will work, how it will work, but we don't really spend time walking into the room as something valuable and something beneficial. I think a lot of times we overlook that people are products too. And you may like my product, you may like my company, but you also kind of have to like me to get the most efficient learning.
Awesome. And Lisa, I mean, just hearing that, an aspect of, candy and priming the mind to be in a good mindset for learning, retaining information, makes me think of those like Snickers commercials. And again, not sponsored, but those ones where it's like, you're not you when you're hungry. I think that speaks to just the importance of doing as much as you can to put people in a good mindset and a good frame of mind and make them comfortable before having a big important meeting or presenting on something that you really need them to pay attention to and retain. I mean, I can think of so many times where I've been in meetings, whether it's just internal or even with customer meetings, where it seems like the person or even multiple people that I'm speaking to, they get a little hostile or defensive, or bring up objections, seemingly out of left field. When in reality, a lot of the times, those reactions might not even be coming from anything that you have said or done. It's just they were in maybe a negative mindset coming in. Maybe something happened to them right before they got pulled into this meeting, and they either weren't all there to pay attention, or they were already focused on a negative aspect before you went into your presentation and started speaking as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's something that you have to kind of find the middle ground with people, right? Business is human, and we're talking to other humans, and we have to find those ways where we can relate to them and ease the tension. It's nerve-wracking learning something new. It's nerve-wracking meeting new people. And people often come into the room with assumptions about you or the product. Like, people think my nails hurt, they don't. So you kind of have to ease people into that and get them to a place where they understand you and you understand them, and then use that to kind of build your story. But a lot of times we think that the story is just one dimensional, but it's the whole thing. It's who's telling the story, how you're telling the story, what you're putting into the story, and what they're doing while they're listening to that story. All of it is connected.
Yeah. And something that I love that you mentioned, bringing it back a little bit, is the aspect of how use cases aren't stories by themselves. I think in a lot of times in business, we kind of rely and lean on talking about use cases and case studies, where what's missing there is kind of going the additional step of explaining how what this case study or story or lesson teaches is applicable and important to the folks in the room that you're speaking to, or nowadays, the folks that you're speaking to over Zoom, because everything is
yeah, everything's over Zoom. And that's really the truth of it. Sometimes we walk into the room like we're machines. We have this objective and we want to get this client onboarded and move forward. But the truth is, you have to slow down, and you have to be, in Neville's words, obsessed with customers. And customers are people. And so how do you speak to that humanity? And when we talk about empathy, it's a very broad word, right? We all have different definitions of what's empathetic. And when we talk about people coming from different cultural backgrounds and different experiences and different workplaces, empathy can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. But there is no empathy without behavioral science. And you can trust behavioral science to inform your decision making so that you can connect with the people in the room better.
Yeah, awesome. And I mean, that whole aspect of business is human. It really, truly is. Something that I've learned full well is people want to and like to work with people that are real, that are genuine, that are empathetic, and are not just coming into the room like robots, like what you just mentioned, Lisa. But yeah, so Lisa, if there were maybe 4 to 5 kind of key takeaways from either what we've already discussed so far in this conversation, or anything else you'd like to kind of chime in with that you'd like to impart with everyone that's tuning in today, like what would those kind of 4 or 5 key takeaways be?
So one of the key takeaways is don't have more than 5. So you want to keep your bullet points short and to the point. People typically remember about 3 to 4 points, so 5 at most. So that's number 1. Number 2, back to the robes at graduation story, review your business processes. Really go over them with a fine-tooth comb. Is it still serving its original function? If not, does it have a new function? If not that, can we get rid of it? You really want to make sure that everything you're doing is actually efficient and not because you've always done it that way. The third thing is case studies are not stories. Stories appeal to the deepest human emotions, which in business, the most important one for us is curiosity. So how does your story make your client or colleague curious so that you can lean on that to make your point? Fourth thing, I think we're at 4, is seize the highs, right? Use your acquisition period in the brain to teach. So the mind is most primed for learning new concepts, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And the little bonus is that it's most primed for connecting the dots between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. So if you're teaching a new concept, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., if you want to go over it and apply it, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Schedule your meetings that work with the brain and the timing of the meetings. Ensure that the duration of the meeting meets the meeting's purpose. If it's just updates, 20 minutes or less. If it's brainstorming, critical thinking, ideation, then 90 minutes max. And that is it from me.
Perfect. And Lisa, don't kill me, but I'm gonna break kind of that rule of the magic number and add a 6th in here as maybe a cherry on the top. But this is for anybody who might want to be gaining some points with executives or leadership at their organizations, because in so many cases, executives and leadership are so far removed from interacting with customers on a day-to-day basis, and focusing on, of course, the more strategic, bigger picture business aspects, and maybe also suffering from some PowerPoint fatigue. So it could be helpful, to help keep executives and leadership empathetic with your customers and users. Every once in a while, send them a recording of a customer or a user running into an issue with one of your products or services to help, again, humanize that. Or even, maybe a customer or user experiencing, one of those serendipitous moments of delight with your products or offerings, to help better tell that customer story in a more bite-sized form, and help keep executives empathetic again by having them walk a mile in the customer's shoes.
Yep. Stay close to the customer.
Yep, absolutely. So that's great. I mean, that's all I had on my end, Lisa. Any parting thoughts here before we kind of wrap up?
We have one question that's pretty interesting is, can we get an example, info without a story and info in a story? So one quick example is cities with large zoos have the highest crime. Why? That's just data. You have a big zoo, you have high crime.
Now I'm interested to hear the correlation.
The correlation is that the larger the zoo, the bigger the city, more people, so the number rises. That's it. But that's the story. But if you see it by itself, it's like, what's the connection between a zoo and crime? And there really isn't one, except you'll have a large zoo in a large city that's heavily populated. And so the more people, the more likelihood of crime. And so in those instances, when you just look at data, it's like, okay, zoo, crime, not making sense. And then you add context and suddenly it starts to paint a picture. So those are some of the ways to use data and create curiosity, right? And that's what you want. You want to create curiosity in your listeners so that you can prime them for this big reveal or surprise or ending. But that's really what you have to do. You have to tell stories and you have to prime the environment for ideal learning.
Perfect. Yeah. And Michael, to your comment here, info without a story. Think of, any meeting that you've been in that where someone just kind of threw a graph at you or a chart, that maybe a pie chart where, one part of the pie is massive and the other part is tiny. And, they mention what it means. But a lot of that is just focusing on the what. And without a story in there, you're missing the why, on either why the data is the way that it is, reasons behind it, but also how you can fix that as well. If it's something negative or if it's something positive, how you can do more of what's there in that chart as well.
Yep. Perfect.
Perfect. All right. So that's all really we had time for today. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And hopefully you got some good insights out of this. Lisa, I really thoroughly enjoyed our chat today.
Thank you. Me too. Tell great stories, everyone.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.